welcome to another episode of Make Better Things with Nirvana CPH and me, Jack CG. Today's episode we're going to be diving into a new series looking at packaging and design trends across the industry. Our Insight team have collated and analysed 8 different prevalent trends that we see, and today we're going to be diving into transparent labelling, a really hot trend that encourages brands and businesses to be more transparent and communicative with their consumers. Today we've got the amazing Katie Kubrak, our head of Insight, to introduce the topic, who you might remember from our first ever episode on CMF design. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy. Katie, so happy to have you back with us.
Thanks so much, Jack. Hello everybody, it's so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Most welcome. So today we're in a different place. We're in our Insights and Materials library, which is a bit of an HQ for yourself. Would you be able to tell our watchers why we're here?
So Insights and Materials Library is a place where we display various materials, curated collections of them sometimes. We display various projects we work on, and at the same time, if for instance we try to communicate a specific narrative with the curated samples of materials, maybe case studies, we try to put it together and bring it to life. And as a department inside, we work by trying to distill what are the newest and hottest trends that are happening in the market, to understand where the industry is going, and doing so, we on occasion put the display of this trend here in our Materials and Insights library. So today the display is titled Transparent Labeling, which is one of the 8 trends we identified for this year. And we've curated various materials from packaging to fashion to point of sale retail worlds to showcase how this trend can come to life.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, just pull up your sleeves and
So transparent labelling, tell us a bit more about what really that is. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is maybe see-through labels.
Yeah. A lot of people, when we start discussing that trend, we're presenting it to people. Quite a lot of designers, marketers, like people from various backgrounds, they straight away start thinking about, okay, so it's about the material being see-through and transparent, etc. But actually, the name is, we chose it on purpose because it's supposed to merge various ideas and movements that are happening within the industry. So we've got the ideas around building and creating transparent supply chains. Then there are ideas about transparency of the ESGs, environmental and social governance ambitions that a brand might have. Then the transparency behind CSR, corporate and social responsibility. Then there are various narratives around sustainable design and how we use design to make sustainable products. So it's a lot of different, quite big topics under this one umbrella. And we started thinking, okay, so it's all about transparency, but it's how will this transparency be communicated to the end consumer? How the brand will try to convey all that messaging? And we distilled it down to labeling. That's why we've put these 2, transparency and labeling, together, and we came up with transparent labeling as a name for this trend, where we see it all heading. Yeah, so it's not like an industry term, kind of those 2 always being put together, but it's almost part of the trend that we're seeing is like going forward. Labeling will no longer just be labeling, it will be so much more. It will be communicating all those topics of transparency.
So in FMCG, fast moving consumer goods, we see a lot, that's where I see most of this transparency, right? It's people communicating calorie content. So that's in my head what the current landscape is, but it sounds like there's such a huge merge of different factors.
Exactly.
What does the landscape look like at the moment?
Like in fast moving consumer goods, especially if you take a zoom into food and beverage, it's a great metaphor for what this trend is, because when we think about a beverage as a drink, it will have a front label and a back label, and both of those labels will need to communicate different factors. They both will need to be designed by a graphic designer, and perhaps with some inputs of product designer, perhaps with some inputs from marketing, etc. But it's these two labels that basically bring all these big ideas together. So the front label then representing the brand's look and feel, the brand selling a certain dream, selling a certain perhaps set of values or status that a person wants to buy into. And then the back label representing all the various factors that are to do with the transparency. So are you going to communicate on your social ambitions? Are you going to communicate various certifications that will then prevent you from actually saying, oh, we're organic and we're self-certified organic, but that doesn't work. And especially with the newest regulation that is coming up within European Union, a brand cannot self-certify. So you can't claim, oh, my product is eco, or like my product is organic, my product is carbon neutral, my product is this and this and that. You actually need to have some kind of certification to say that on the label. And it is a legislation that's directly trying to intervene within the world of marketing and the world of brands, abusing certain loopholes and then it being greenwashing basically.
Right, yeah.
So that back label, it's almost the most interesting part about the brands of tomorrow essentially, because it's about bringing all these different ideas together. It's no longer about just the caloric input or the nutrition of your product. It's about what is the nutrition of its packaging. Is it harming the environment? Is it adding to the environment? Where is it being sourced from? How is it helping the bigger picture of the world? And when you think about all that content, that's a lot of information to put on something quite small as well. So part of this trend is like, how do you then communicate all of that information in such a minimum space that you have? And obviously I'm giving here like an example of a label back and front, but it could be other things as well. A slightly different example could be when we were younger and we would go and get ourselves like a CD, an album, right? We would have packaging with like a beautiful booklet inside. That booklet will tell you everything about the inspiration, all the lyrics, perhaps people involved, and it would have a lot of content. We don't really have products that can have that amount of content on them anymore, right? Especially if we need to minimize the use of materials that we use in order to create something. I feel like within this trend, there's just so many conflicting ideas, and how do you bring them together?
Yeah, that is tough. I guess, like you say, we're kind of seeing that people are finding this a big obstacle with really prevalent greenwashing everywhere.
Exactly.
Do you think it is like a lack of understanding about what transparent labeling is, and that's what's stopping people from making that leap and really including it and putting it at the forefront?
So one of the drivers within this trend is through innovation, finding unique selling point. So I feel sometimes brands might want to talk about one thing in 20 different ways in order to talk about it differently to how other brands have spoken about it.
Right.
A good example is, and I will not mention the brand, but there is a fashion brand that openly on their website has quite a lot of content discussing botanical fibers and that their garments are using botanical fibers. And actually, after we have seen it, we've done a bit of research into consumer perception of what a botanical fiber is. And I don't know, should I ask you what's your opinion?
Yeah, good. I would imagine fibres either made from herbs or made from gin.
Well, fair enough. And you're not the only one. Other guesses we get is florals.
Yeah.
So made from petals, perhaps, or made from grass. So it's pretty vague, right?
Yeah.
But the way how the brand is discussing about these fibers is completely different to how other people discuss the same set of fibers.
Okay.
And essentially, they're not saying the wrong thing, because botanical means it's plant-based, plant-derived.
Okay.
And their fiber is derived from trees, from cellulose. So they're technically
They're
not wrong, and technically within the, let's say, the dictionary explanation of that particular word,
they fit into the definition.
They fit in the definition, but the consumer perception of what they're trying to communicate does not match what it is, because as you're saying, there's perhaps not enough understanding of what certain terminology means, what certain terminology is. Then that goes as well into what is an organic material, what is a vegan material, what is a renewable material. And then when brands use this language, and you've got the consumer perhaps not quite sure what it is, there is a definitive gap.
Yeah.
That's why, I don't want to say that's why we've got greenwashing, but because brands try to be unique and stand out in the marketplace, they go through these poetic verbalizations of what they're trying to do and communicate, and then when you at the end have the consumer who's still, trying to get a gist of the very basic linguistics within the sustainable world, it can become too much and create a lot of confusion. So that's why as well, to almost like unify what is organic, what is vegan, all of that, European Union is introducing this law where you cannot self-certify, therefore it can't be your opinion as a brand that, oh yeah, we're using an organic material, oh yeah, we're using a vegan, we're using a renewable, we're using a biodegradable, compostable, etc. material. There needs to be some kind of certification, and because that certification will have a certain approved and licensed method of identifying or accounting that material as such, it kind of gives a little bit more structure gradually to the industry to kind of not have this gap that you were discussing.
Almost like these businesses they've been doing their own thing.
Well, yeah,
And
because if there's no harmonization across anything, like you will end up doing your own thing, which sometimes can be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because
can be the innovation, can be the disruptor, but.
Exactly. And what I mean about them sometimes, on occasion, doing their own thing being a good thing, when we talk about the labeling and how much impact, whether it's carbon impact or recycling, whatever you want to communicate, when we're discussing that side of the story, sometimes it's good to do your own thing because it can be more specific, if that makes sense. So if you're trying to calculate what is your brand's impact, instead of using a calculator that uses standardized data, it's way better for you to actually create your own method of accounting. Obviously then there's a question like, well, yeah, but you can't self-certify, etc., but there are methods out there that you can apply into your brand, but then the numbers that you receive become specific to your brand. So then on the label, you can authentically and transparently communicate the actual facts, because there's been quite a few situations in which a brand has communicated something using a very popular material calculator, and then because the calculator was using standardized data, it was not at all one-to-one to what the impact of the product was. So then imagine, like, brand was trying to do the right thing, but then because it wasn't specific, their numbers were not transparent, their numbers were considered greenwashing, and they needed to scrap the whole thing.
Wow. It must be quite gutting for a few brands and businesses that think that they're going to the right efforts and don't realise that there's actually so much more that they could be doing. So the landscape sounds kind of getting there, let's say.
Yes.
Well, the word I think of is it has a lot of potential, and we're focusing in on these ideas and where it could expand and really what these brands need to be doing. As our head of Insight, what's your dream scenario for transparent labelling in the future?
I would say it breaks into two separate points. First point is brands take it more seriously upon themselves to educate everybody in their various teams. So the teams don't work in silos, they don't have different ideas of sustainability and transparency. Everybody has a harmonized view on the materials and the impact the brand is trying to create. So it's that education. We've spoken about education in our first episode as well. I'm just clicking this.
It's a theme.
It's a theme. I guess education is my dream. I feel because if brands become more serious about that education aspect of their staff, then the output they're gonna give into the world will be of much higher quality. As one of the drivers in the trend as well, we're saying that know-how is the key, because if you don't have the know-how, then going back to what we were just saying before, you get confused. What's organic? What's this? You need the know-how in order to understand what you're working with. What is the message you're trying to communicate? All of that. So I would say that part, the know-how, the education, is one part of it. Second one, well, the dream is to create the most beautiful labels that can communicate it all. And they can use the newest technologies to make it fun, to make it approachable. And obviously we do have various generations that we might be wanting to tailor, and certain generations might be more tech savvy to another. But I feel you could almost create a tiered approach whereby you can learn a certain portion of information through your labeling, like directly available, and then you can go slightly further in if you activate it through various digital technologies such as the QR codes, NFC, perhaps augmented reality as well is quite of an interesting way of approaching, because what if you can, through augmenting the reality, you can actually transport somebody to the place where, for instance, your trees were harvested or your wool was harvested, or, you know, it's straight away creating a completely different experience of transparency. And I feel this is how, as well, transparency becomes the norm. Transparency becomes the idea, the vehicle, the medium for luxury. If it becomes that norm and you're creating all these different experiences around it, you're not only just more transparently educating your consumer as well, you're bringing them on the journey with you. The journey of the product, imagination, the dream is more alive than ever.
It sounds like a good future.
Let's see. We will, as a team, work tirelessly to try and make it happen.
Well, and speaking of
to make
the
better
future
things.
and making better things and educating people, what if you've enjoyed this talk so far about transparent labeling? Could you tell us a bit about the workshops that we do here, or that you do here, and why people might want to come after listening to this episode?
Of course. The workshop consists of 3 parts. Part 1 is about the context we're discussing, but diving way deeper. So if we talk legislation, we're kind of breaking down what's happening where around the world. If we're talking about consumer demand, breaking it down a bit more. Or if we're talking about how does that fit within the creative process and perhaps the challenges that designers might face. Again, we go into more detail, basically. Especially that part of this workshop is very well tailored to various departments. So whether you're in a creative department, whether you're in procurement, whether you're in marketing, whether you're helping your brand to build the ESG, CSR ambitions that are realistic, that are accountable, and sometimes perhaps you struggle how to do it, this is a great workshop for that. You will have like a very comprehensive approach. So the trend not only describes the context, but it gives you the tools how you can implement it and work for you better.
Wow.
So yeah, that's that. And then we've got lots of different lovely materials here as well. So we go through all the different materials as a very engaging, creative way. We create material mood boards. So anyone who's come so far, and there's been quite a few people, they've created their own dream for transparent labeling. They bring different materials from different sectors, they mix them in different ways, and it's quite cool because we've seen people from procurement, for instance, or people from different industries that, for instance, want to create influencer collateral or want to create something miscellaneous for their ventures. People who normally don't play with materials like that, they can come, play, understand how it works, and it's beautiful. And then creatives, they have a curated collection of materials that essentially all the materials will tick different things. that the designers will need to deliver on at the end of the day. The workshop can give you different things depending where you are, but it's quite nice that it doesn't matter where you are because it will give you something, something that you can take away and then you make better things for your brand.
So valuable. It sounds really amazing, but like you say, for all levels of understanding, and hopefully gets everyone a step closer to that future.
Exactly.
That we're talking about. I've got one more question, which I think you might know what's coming. Obviously, at the end of all of our episodes, we quite like to ask people a cheeky little question.
Okay.
If there was one thing that you could make better in the world, what would it be? Well, you can't say transparent labelling.
You got me with this one today. My brain is very much within the topic.
It can be adjacent, it can be linked.
I would want to say something to do with numbers.
Oh.
Because anything that we do going forward, what I would want to change is how could we work with numbers better and not be so frightened by them, but we can actually make them work for us. And I don't know whether it's AI that could help us break through certain fears and stigmas. Oh, numbers are not for me, or I don't understand, like make them more digestible so they can serve our future better. Because we need to work with them in order to make any kind of meaningful change.
Yeah. I love that. More kids in STEM. Yeah, no, that's great. I agree. I'm terrified of numbers. So
well, you're not the only one. We all are in one way or another, you know?
Thank you so much, Katie, for this toe dip in the waters of transparent labelling. Obviously, you've got the amazing workshop on at the moment. Please tell the audience where they can find out more if they want a deep dive.
Yeah, so at the moment we're offering a free complimentary workshop to anyone who's interested to learn more about this trend. If you want to learn more, in the description of this video, I'm sure we're going to put a link to website where you can book the workshop, and then just come along and let's have some fun exploring cool, interesting, whilst environmentally friendly materials and finishes and case studies. Just come along and let's have fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found transparent labelling really fascinating, definitely book yourself in for one of Insight's complimentary workshops. As mentioned, the link's below in the description of the video, or you can find us on socials, where in our link tree you can also access it and book from there. Thank you so much, and as always, make better things.